All right, let's get started. Welcome and happy Friday. It is almost the end of the month. Can you believe it? We're in October. My name is Sam Stewart. I am a project manager here at the All of Us Research Data and Research Center. If you've been with us for office hours, you've seen me quite a bit. I'm joined by several of my colleagues today. So as we go through the presentation, feel free to put your questions in the general group chat. But before we get started, I have a few announcements that might be of interest to you. So first, the National Alliance of Hispanic Health has their Todos Juntos research grants that are going to be due next week on October the 28th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you are working in the All of Us Researcher Workbench and have a project that is specifically looking and studying chronic disease in Hispanic communities, this might be a great grant opportunity for you. So scan the QR code to learn more, but if you have specific questions, feel free to email us at support@researchallofus.org and we'll route you to the appropriate point of contact. I'll give everyone a quick moment to scan the QR code, but Monday is the deadline, so it is coming up. Our next announcement is coming from the University of Arizona Banner Health. They are also seeking seed grant applications for research projects that use all of this data. And so they're looking for 3 proposals that could get up to $40,000. And these grants are open to investigators from any institution in the United States and its territories, as long as you have a data use and registration agreement in place. So feel free to scan the QR code to learn more about the requirements for those grant proposals. And I'll also give everyone a moment. Those are going to be due in December on December the 2nd. All right. And then our final announcement today is going to be about the Aim Ahead Research Fellowship Program, which is a group of early career researchers who participate in biomedical research that involves machine learning or AI tools. And so we do have several researchers that use this type of model on the Researcher Workbench. So all of us is one of the data sets that Aim Ahead typically uses. And we've had several Aim Ahead fellows publish using all of this data. So if you are interested in learning more about the Aim Ahead Research Fellowship Program, please scan the QR code or go to the link at the bottom of your screen. All right, so welcome to today's office hours. Today we're going to be learning more about the shared folder in RStudio and SAS, which was recently introduced in the Researcher Workbench using GCSFUSE. I'm going to announce our presenter today. Moira Dillon is a product manager at the Data and Research Center. She specifically works at Verily, where she has worked on the Researcher Workbench for the last 3 years. Prior to that, she worked at Microsoft on Azure Health Data Services. She also studied mathematical and computational biology at Harvey Mudd College and currently resides in Chicago. Moira is our point of contact for all Workbench things, and so we're actually really excited to have her on the call today. So I will stop sharing my screen and she will go ahead and get started today. I do want to know if you could hold all questions to the end of the presentation or put them in the chat. We will do open Q&A at the end of today's presentation. All right, Moira, on off to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam, for the introduction. And hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here and be talking about shared workspace storage in the Researcher Workbench for RStudio and SAS. So I have a lot to cover today, so I'm just going to dive right in and start with an overview of how this works in the Workbench. Again, this is our disclaimer. Our presentation today is intended to highlight features in the Workbench. Participant privacy is always of utmost importance to our program, and all of the data I'm showing today is synthetic data. So as an overview of what we're going to do today, I will first outline how shared workspace storage works in the Researcher Workbench, and then I'll go over to the Researcher Workbench and do a live demo of how this shared workspace storage works. So as we all know, each workspace in the Researcher Workbench has a dedicated workspace bucket for storing files. These buckets are automatically linked to your workspace. It's where you store all of your data. But they come with storage in the Researcher Workbench comes with a host of various challenges. And I think we all have probably hit some pain point or another around storing data in the cloud. We have introduced GCSFUSE to really simplify some of that storage access. So RStudio and SAS Studio now both support this functionality, which allows you to interact with your workspace bucket as if it really were like a local folder on your computer, making file management easier and potentially saving on storage costs. And I'll dig into that in a little bit as well. So first, what is GCSFUSE? Cloud Storage Fuse, also known as GCSFUSE, is a Google Cloud product that allows you to mount Google Cloud Storage buckets as file systems on your local machine or on your virtual machine. So I like to think of it as this bridge that connects my VM's file system to my cloud storage and lets me interact with buckets like I would with folders on my computer. So there are lots of benefits to this, but the three really big ones I want to call out are one, simplifying file storage. So GCSFUSE lets you really access, manage, and organize files directly within your RStudio environments in the UI. And without some of these like complex cloud storage commands that we see, particularly with SAS. GCSFUSE really enhances collaboration, allows you to really easily share files with collaborators within the same workspace. Everyone has access to the same shared folder. It can also help you reduce your persistent disk storage costs, which we know can add up. It's a lot easier. It's really easy to move files over to your shared folder and out of your persistent disk so that you can optimize your persistent disk usage and reduce your costs. And instead of paying to store things in your persistent disk, you could store them in your workspace bucket in the shared folder to save yourself some cost. So what is this shared folder? It is a pre-configured folder within your workspace bucket that's automatically mounted using this tool called GCSFUSE for RStudio and SAS. It costs 20 cents a gigabyte per month for storage, just like a workspace bucket. And in RStudio, and we'll go into this in more detail, in RStudio, in your File Explorer, will now see a shared folder every time you launch RStudio. And in SAS, in your File Explorer, you will also see a shared folder every time you open up RStudio. So those both, or open up SAS Studio. So those both will automatically be available to you to use. So I think the most important question is, when should you use the shared folder? What should you put in the shared folder? Like, how does this benefit you? What I would recommend using the shared folder for is if you have any type of file that you want to really easily open in another application. And I'll talk about how this works with Jupyter in a little bit too, but a good example is I might do some data cleaning in RStudio and want to access that data in SAS, or vice versa. Go from some SAS data cleaning to Jupyter, etc. This really lets you super simply move data between different applications. If you put something in the shared folder, it's going to be available in any of your applications really easily. Similarly, if there's something you want to share with a collaborator, instead of syncing it to like your own persistent disk where it's saved by default, you could move something to the shared folder so anyone in your workspace can also access that. So this could be something, again, like a CSV of data that you've created. It could be visuals, graphics that you create that you want your collaborators to be able to see. So instead of keeping it on your own persistent disk, move it over to the shared folder and they can really easily access it as well. And then finally, that last piece is just if there are files that you have stored on your persistent disk right now that you want to retain for long-term storage, you can move them over to your workspace bucket in the shared folder, and then you could potentially like clean up and delete your persistent disk to save yourself some cost too. So I think I'm most excited about this from a cost savings perspective, just having an easier option to delete your persistent disk if you need to. So then the other question is, what should you keep in your default location? So we recommend keeping like your core analysis files in the default location. So that's things like your R scripts or your SAS programs, or if there's any file that you need immediate access to from your persistent disk, that makes sense to leave on their persistent disk. So let's talk a little bit about how this works with RStudio. The next time you go and launch RStudio, and maybe you've seen this already, you'll see that your shared folder is automatically mounted at home/RStudio/shared. In the File Explorer, you can navigate to that shared folder to create, upload, move, and rename files. You can also use the terminal in RStudio to interact with the shared folder and move files around from your persistent disk to the shared folder as well. And I'll show you some more examples of that in a little bit. And we have examples of how to do that in the User Support Hub in that linked article, which Sam already put in the chat. When it comes to SAS, it's very similar to RStudio. You can see that your shared folder is automatically mounted in your Workspace bucket. In the File Explorer, you can see that shared folder. And from the File Explorer, it's super easy to create, upload, move, and rename files. You can also use SAS like file management commands within your SAS programs to interact with the shared folder. I can show you what that looks like, but that involves like moving commands to move something again from your persistent disk to your shared folder or vice versa. And we have examples of those in the User Support Hub as well. Finally, I want to talk about Jupyter. So how does this shared folder interact with Jupyter? Once you create an RStudio or a SAS application in your workspace, your shared folder will then be available from Jupyter, and you can interact with it using gsutil commands like you would with the Workspace bucket in Jupyter. You can access files you've put there from other apps. You can add files there. So again, very similar and just really making it easy to move files around. So in this screenshot, you see I'm first just listed, okay, what's in my Workspace bucket. I see I have this shared folder. I listed the contents of my shared folder. And that's actually a CSV I created in SAS. So I'll show you that in a little bit, how you move things around really easily. But I just want to emphasize, like, you have to have first created an RStudio or SAS app in your Workspace, and then that shared folder in Jupyter will become available. So before I move into a demo, I just want to share some of my takeaways for using the shared folder and what the benefits are. Again, it really helps you simplify your file management by letting you access and manage files in your buckets directly from your apps. It enhances your collaboration with your coworkers and colleagues by letting you share data and files seamlessly in your workspace. It helps you optimize your cost in your workspace by reducing persistent disk costs by storing files in the more affordable shared folder. And it helps you improve your efficiency. I find especially like with moving files around in like SAS, it takes a lot of steps. This really helps streamline that workflow and let you focus on your research, not on these complex file storage tasks. And again, just one more call out for that User Support Hub article, which has all of this written up and all of these examples as well. So I will pause here and I will move over to my demo. And let me switch over to the Researcher Workbench. Sam, can you see the Researcher Workbench right now, or am I still sharing my slides?
I can see the workbench.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so today in my demo, what I'm going to go through is how to use the shared folder in RStudio in detail. I'll show what it looks like in Jupyter after I've interacted with my shared folder in RStudio. And I'll briefly touch on SAS too, but I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for questions. So I'm in my workspace right now. I'm using that synthetic data set. You can see on the right-hand side, I have an RStudio, SAS, and Jupyter environment all running right now because I've been using the shared folder across all three applications today. First, I'm going to go over to RStudio, where I already have a tab open with RStudio. And the first thing I'm going to do is import a data set. So I generated a data set from our dataset builder that pulls together demographic information for a cohort of people with type 2 diabetes. And it pulls together their basic survey information as well. So I'm going to run this script so I can create my data set. Great. It is creating, and as that's running, I just want to show that in the right-hand corner now, you can see that shared folder. You can see that that already exists, and we're about to start interacting with it. Okay, great. So I have my data set. Next, I'm just going to write that into a CSV. So I'm just grabbing my command so I don't forget and updating that. Great. Okay, so I just turned my data frame in RStudio into a CSV. So I can see I have that RStudio dataset.csv now. So now I've created this CSV, and imagine I did a bunch of analysis on this data before I created a CSV. And I want my coworker to be able to use this CSV in SAS to do a different analysis in SAS. Or I want to open this in Jupyter because now I want to switch over to Python and run a separate analysis in Python. What I can do here is I can click on this file and I can select that move button and simply move it over to my shared folder. And now if I click in here in my shared folder, I see RStudio dataset.csv. Now I could go to SAS, Jupyter, and open this file immediately, or any of my colleagues could open it from RStudio, SAS, or Jupyter as well. Just want to emphasize like how simple that is to just move files around like that. And the other way that you can use the shared folder and move files around in RStudio is just with these shared folder commands that we have. So this is just a text file I created, so I remembered all of our shared folder commands. These are in that support article, but I could open up the terminal and take a look at everything I have in my shared folder from the terminal. Again, there's that RStudio dataset we just created as a CSV. This CSV is one I created in SAS earlier today. And then I can also use these commands to move files between my persistent disk and my shared folder. So it's super easy to just follow these along, and all I would have to do is just change the file name here to be that RStudio dataset.csv, and I can move them back and forth very simply. So now I want to pop over to Jupyter and show how now I can access that CSV in Jupyter that I created in RStudio, or I could also create a different CSV in Jupyter and add it to my shared folder and then take a look at that in RStudio as well. So first, let's just take a look at what we already have in our Workspace bucket. So in my Workspace bucket, I see that I have this shared folder. Great, I expect to see that. And if I see what is in my shared folder, perfect, I'm gonna see that RStudio dataset I just created. So now easily could start working with the CSV directly in Jupyter. The other flow that we can take is we could import a dataset into Jupyter. We could save that as a CSV. We could do some manipulation on that data and then open it up in RStudio. So I'll show you what that looks like as well. So here I have my dataset builder code that I generated. I'm going to run this code snippet to import that dataset from our dataset builder. Great. I'm going to just easily convert that over to a CSV using the toCSV command. Again, we could imagine I've done all this data manipulation. I'm going to copy that over to my shared folder. Oh, I have an error. I messed around with this code earlier. I can just using gsutil like copy commands, copy that over to my shared folder, and then that'll open up also directly into my RStudio shared folder. And then the last thing I just wanted to quickly show you all was what this looks like in SAS. So very similarly, you can create any type of file. You can put anything into the shared folder that you want. My examples today are all like creating CSVs. So in SAS, I also created a data set using the code from the data set builder. I took a look at all of my imported data in my library. I saved that as a CSV. Oops, sorry. I saved that as a CSV. And then I just right-clicked on that CSV and said, move to my shared folder. The other way that you can work with the shared folder and work with files in SAS is using these commands like you see here, which again are in our support hub article, but these show you how to, in a SAS program, move files around. I definitely prefer in SAS just being able to use the UI to move files around. I think it's much more intuitive to just right click and say move. I think in Jupyter and RStudio, it's more intuitive. You're using more common commands. Where SAS, it's a little trickier, but we have the examples if you want them. So again, I just want to emphasize why we've introduced the shared folder. Our goal here is to really help you all just access your files easier, save your files easier, get them to your coworkers quicker, get them to other applications quicker. And truly anything can go in the shared folder, whatever you want to be able to access in another application, have a colleague access. That's a great thing to go in that shared folder. And again, we recommend like using it to help you save on some storage costs too. Like add things to your shared folder that you want to keep around long term, so you don't have to store them on your persistent disk. So with that, I will stop there and open it up to questions if anyone wants to learn more about the shared folder and has any questions for me.